好的，那么时间来到早上的这个7:30，2893的观众听众朋友们，大家 Good morning， 欢迎收看收听我爱纽西兰，我是 Andrew 安德鲁。那么正在电视机前的观众朋友们，现在看到呢这一位朋友啊。他也就是今天早上呢，我爱纽西兰星期三的早晨呢，在我们直播室里面的首位嘉宾，他是谁呢？他就是呢这一次奥克兰市长的候选人啊，或者是竞选人之一，他的名字叫做 Efeso Collins。Efeso Collins，Efeso 已经是坐在我旁边了。Good morning, Efeso.
Oh, good morning, 大家好 and thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you here. Now, Efeso, I'm not sure if the Chinese community really know you about it, but we have TV, we have radio, we have YouTube broadcasting at the same time. So first of all, I would like you to briefly introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning. I grew up in Auckland. My parents came here. They migrated from Samoa in the 1960s. And their intention was to come here, get work, and make sure that their children had...
So you are the second generation?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And so they wanted one of us to get schooling here in New Zealand. And I'm the first in my family, the youngest of six, but the first to go to university.
Oh.
Yeah, so our parents wanted one of us to go. And given the challenges they were facing at the time, everyone went to work. And so because I was the youngest, all my family said, right, you have to honour mum and dad and you go to university. So I spent quite a bit of time at university.
What did you study?
I studied philosophy and education.
Already?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So I started off doing lots of different things, economics, accounting, and then I found a real interest in philosophy. And so I did quite a bit of kind of German philosophy while I was at university. But it was while I was there, one of the things I realised was a lot of our young people weren't going to university. And so I ended up, after I did my master's degree, I stayed at the university and worked another 7 years because they asked me to go back into schools and encourage young people to come to tertiary education. So I had a really good time. All up, I spent about 15 years at university, and it was great because a lot of our people in church, a lot of the people in the community thought, well, it's important that our kids think about going to university, that they extend themselves and that they get a good education, because that's the kind of thing that's going to prepare us for a very prosperous future. And I'm sure many who are watching and listening to your show today will know that many of us came to New Zealand for that purpose, whether it's international students or just families trying to get started, would have been thinking about education.
So education is still a very hot topic, you know. So you spent quite a bit of time. It has very, very tight connections with your community. Now, tell me what actually motivates you to put your hands up for the top job this time?
Yeah, I thought it was time. I've been on the council now I've been a councillor for 2 terms, so coming to the end of my 6th year, and I've used those 2 terms to understand how the council works, the challenges that we have, how rates works and how people pay their money, and how we use other people's money to make sure that we have a city that's prosperous. And we want to make sure that the city goes further, that we have a city that's for everybody, it's inclusive, but also a city that's for children as well. And I've got 2 young daughters, and I want them to feel like Auckland is their home. We often go back to Samoa, and that's home for us as well, because it's where our parents grew up. And I had a bit of time in Samoa as well. But I want everyone to feel like this is a great place to grow your family, to have a family, and to ensure that they've got a future here. And so I put my hand up because I'm keen on a vision for Auckland, one that's very sustainable, where we're dealing to our climate action challenges, but also where we can raise a family, be proud about this city. There's 1.7 million people in this city. And I think it's really important that we all come together, because COVID was hard on all of us. And many of your listeners and your followers will know that was a challenging time where we were all locked down a little bit and people weren't able to get out and about. And as I've met people, I've understood that people really want to interact again. They want to connect. They want the chance to really reconnect so that they can prosper. And so I put my hand up saying that's the kind of leadership that I will provide the city, where I'm inclusive. I've been getting around, listening to people to make sure that we hear what their vision is as well, and that we're a community, we're a big city made up of lots of communities, and everyone wants to feel like they can have a voice. And I'm hopeful that whether you're Chinese or Samoan or Korean, everyone feels like this is their home and they can build for a future that's
So isn't that being a city councillor is not good enough? You want to be a mayor? What is the main difference can you see between as a councillor and a mayor in your job?
So for the councillor, I represent Manuko, so that's a part of the area, and people will know that that's places like Papatoetoe and Mangere, and I've represented that area, and now I want to represent the whole city. And so I think it's important that the mayor has the opportunity to speak to all of Aucklanders, everyone who's come from overseas or if you were born here, and that's what I think the big difference is. And it gives someone the opportunity to make sure that this is a vision where they've listened to lots of Aucklanders and then they've worked together with the council. And I think that I'm able to bring the councillors together so that they're very collaborative.
How would you describe, for the last 5.5 years, how would you describe your job being a councillor? Are you happy with the city council at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's challenges. I think we're on a good path, but I think we need to lift our eyes a bit more. And people will know that the council has had seriously reduced income. We've lost over $1 billion or close to $1 billion over the last 4 years because of COVID, and we project that money's not going to come in. So with less money coming in, can we do more? Can we serve the community is the big question. And I think Phil Goff, who you've had on your program last week, has done a good job at making sure that we aren't overspending, that we're doing the best that we can. But now I think it's time for a leader that provides the vision. What's the next step? And that's why I've put my hand up for the mayoralty, because now it's really, we've got a good sound foundation now, and now's the opportunity for us to step up, go to the next level, and invite Aucklanders to dream again.
Now here comes the questions. Do you want to be another Phil Goff?
No, I won't. I'll always be me. I'll always be Efeso Collins. But I think what we can look back on is people like Phil Goff have done a really good job at creating the conditions so that we can go to the next level.
So how would you be able to perform differently from Phil Goff?
I think my style is such that I want to listen, and I'm the kind of leader that...
Are you saying that he never listens?
Oh, I think he listens, but I think this is the opportunity as we come out of COVID for us to get back out into the community. And Phil and I have different styles, and he and I have agreed on lots of things, and there have been a few things we've disagreed on. I think that's what council needs, is how do we make sure that if we're going to have a big vision for the city, let's get everyone to...
Give us an example about what you actually disagree with Phil Goff.
Yeah, one of the things we disagreed on was the regional fuel tax. So people will know that we increased petrol by 11.5 cents. That includes per litre, for including the GST. And my view was that it's hard on families that were already struggling. And so to pay extra money at the pump was going to be difficult for our families. And my challenge to the council was, well, why aren't we going back to the government saying, well, why don't you share some of your money with us? We have $300 million we could get just off GST get back from the government. And so that was the way I wanted it to go. I didn't win that vote because more people agreed with having the regional fuel tax. But I think it shows that you can have disagreements, but you continue to work together. And we know that some of that money has paid for key transport infrastructure and projects that the city needs. Really, it's about how do we find the money for a city that's growing. 1.7 million people. We're adding 40,000 cars to the roads every day. And it's looking at, well, do we need more cars or more cycle lanes, more pedestrian ways to walk? So all of those discussions are ways in which...
Can I actually read that as, you against regional fuel tax because you were concerned about more and more families is actually struggling? Can I read that as, if you were elected as a mayor, you will try to push to cancel the regional fuel tax, and additionally, maybe there will be no more rate hikes in the future?
I think there's a broad package that we need to consider. I'm definitely maintain my position in voting against the regional fuel tax. I think the better way to do it is maybe a congestion charge, and that's been looked at the moment. So many cities all over the world, whether you look at London, Singapore, when you're going into the city, if you're driving your car in, they can pick up your car and they might charge you $3 or $4 for going in during peak hours. I think that's a better way to charge it, because what it does is it means those of us who don't need to go into the city
you don't have to
won't be paying for that charge. So I think that's the better way, given that the regional fuel tax is giving us some extra income for transport projects. I think when it comes to rates, we need to look at what our rates bill is at the moment. And rather than look at it as a financial positioning, I think the way we should look at rates is what's the level of rates in comparison to our income. And at the moment in Auckland, most people on median income, average, are paying around 3.5% of their income towards rates. And in most OECD countries, 5% is what they see as the limit. So we're well below that. So there might be a range of things, whether it's paying a bit more in rates, whether it's borrowing a little bit more, whether it's delaying some of our projects.
But when you compare rates and income, don't you have to compare the kind of service that you're fetching?
Yeah, and that's the challenge we have, because if we don't continue to meet the costs that we have at the moment, it means that some services will suffer. And that's one of the things we've done at council since COVID came in. We haven't got all the money coming in, so as a result of that, people have lost jobs, and so that affects our frontline services in particular. So we need to understand, well, what's our key services, what's the kind of community we want to build, and ensure that all of our energy and our resources are focused there. And that means we've got to be much more deliberate with our rates that we're taking from people. And we should be proud too, because Auckland Council's income, only 45% comes from rates. More than half of our income comes from other sources. So it's looking for how do we expand the income that we're getting from the ports, from the shares that we have at Auckland Airport, from people travelling on the buses, that kind of thing. So that's giving us more money as revenue than the income that we get from our
Do you
rates.
not believe, instead of focusing more on ways how to generate more revenue, maybe the City Council should actually reconsider the way how they spend the money to make it more productive?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And the people of Auckland's to get a better service, like, say, for example, Auckland Transport.
Yeah, so absolutely, I agree with that. And over the last 10 years, Auckland Council has saved over $2 million in efficiencies, and then in this term alone, just in the last 3 years,
$2 million
in efficiencies over the last 11 years, and in this term
that's
alone,
not a lot.
Yeah,
over the period of 11 years.
Yeah, but given what it does show is that we're showing that we're trying to be much more responsible. Remember, we've only been a big council for 12 years now, so all the councils came together. It was working out where was the spend not needed, and so we've now had the chance to look at all the councils coming together. We've got one single council now, and now let's work out what the best level of spend is. And even in the last 3 years, we've saved $447 million. So I think it shows that our focus is on making sure we're efficient, we're doing the best for Auckland, but let's also look at ways, if we want to do more for the city, then let's look at other alternative streams of revenue that we can get, and that's where I think we can grow the income pie whilst also watching how we spend, because we don't want to be wasting money, and that's something, we have a value for money committee, and that's why we don't want to be wasting any money. We want to be efficient, so that Aucklanders look and they think we pay our rates and we're happy with the services that we're getting and the projects that are being invested in, and that's an ongoing discussion we need to have.
We're going to have a lot of in the future. We can talk a lot more with regards to the City Council spending. But the next question I have with you, for you, is according to the latest, or probably the first ratepayer poll. Your support is around about 21.7%. Are you disappointed with the result?
Oh, I'm glad. You're in the race. Yeah, I think what it shows is one of the things.
It's a very tight race with the rivals.
Yeah, it is a very tight race. But what we know from local government elections is that we don't have high voter turnout. We usually get about, I think in the last local government election, Auckland had about 36% of eligible voters vote. So that means only 1 in 3 people are voting. So the key challenge here is making sure we get out to meet people and they know that the election is happening. happening and we get them to vote, and I'm hoping they vote for me. But what that poll does show is that there's a bit of congestion, and people are still working out who their candidate is. And I'm glad that I'm leading in the polls, and it shows that we're working hard, but there's a long way to go yet. And it's really important that people understand, well, what's his leadership style like? What are some of the things?
But amongst all these candidates, we'll talk about maybe about 8 candidates. You know, you have the most experience working within the city council. You should be the most well-known candidates, and you are getting about the same support as the others. Are you not disappointed with the result?
No, I think it shows that what we've got to do is keep working. And I think what I do bring is the experience of being on council. And I think people will look at that and think that's something extra that I provide because I know how the machine works. And I know where there might be pockets where we can do better. And so I'm really glad with the result. But there's 3 months to go, and important that we get to all of our voters. We know that there's real support out there. It's important that people know, because a lot of our focus is on what happens in Wellington, but not a lot of focus so much happens in local government. So that's why I think it's going to be a close race, but I'm glad with the position we have at the moment, we can only go up from here.
Now, Efeso, you're the only candidate been openly endorsed by a political party, as far as I know, which is Labour. Do you now believe not to be an independent candidate does more harm than good?
Yeah, look, I'm really proud. I'm supported by Labour.
Especially when we look at recently, you know, according to most of the polls, the Labour Party, their support is falling. Do you not believe they are actually dragging your election campaign down?
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge of when you watch what's happening at central government
and then
you come to Auckland. I actually think it's really good. I'm fortunate in that I'm endorsed by Labour, the Greens and the unions. And what that says is I can still disagree. So people know I voted against the regional fuel tax. They know that I have a certain position on other things. And what that does is being an independent who is endorsed by Labour and the Greens means that when I disagree with them or when I want them to go a little bit further, then we can have those discussions and we're honest with each other. So the endorsement just means that we have shared values, that we're about being inclusive, being robust in our approach and making sure that we're responsible for people's money. So that's the endorsement. And then I have the independent, which gives me the buffer, the opportunity to say, no, I disagree with you on those things. So in that regard, I'm going to go down another path. So I think I've got the best of both worlds.
Okay. So thank you, Efeso, for coming this morning.
Thank you.
And I'm really looking forward for the next interview with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's been very interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much. 在今天早上呢，刚才我也是首次呢，就是面对面这个与这个 Efeso Collins 见面，感觉上他非常的温柔。
我跟你说。对比起来哦，你就是粗汉。
我太过的粗暴是吧？
没有，但是他说话真的比我想象当中的要温柔哎。
你会发现呢，其实很多的很斯文很 gentle 的那么一个人啊。
而且他人高马大，但是说话很温柔，
是非常的温柔啊。那么在事前呢，我没有跟他有进行任何的一些提点或者是。那么当然呢，这个是一个初次的见面，也希望呢借着这一个 interview 呢，能够将 Efeso Collins 介绍给大家。我们都知道呢，在这一次的这一个奥克兰市长的候选人当中呢，目前所知道的名单呢是8人。8人当中呢，在近期呢，我们也看到了，其中有4人呢，他们在这个民调方面呢是非常的接近都是几乎在20%、21%左右，有一个是差不多16%左右。所以说呢，在未来我们的差不多2个半、3个月左右呢，我们会非常的忙碌会一直安排呢这些候选人。给予大家一个非常公平的这个机会。如果他们愿意接受我们的访谈的话那么当然我们没有办法去强行的要求他们来如果他们愿意上来我们这个节目的话呢，我们是希望呢给每一位候选人都一个非常公平的机会。除了就是说自我介绍之外呢，也要听听他们如果真的是选上了市长，他们会有一些什么不一样的作风？他们会跟我们所熟悉的奥克兰市长现任市长 Phil 会是一个什么样的一个区别？我觉得这一点是蛮重要的
是，那么首先呢，就跟大家来稍微介绍一下 ，Efeso Collins 是在8位候选人当中算是可能大家比较熟悉的一名了。毕竟呢，他在过去的2届。这个奥克兰的选举当中呢，一直都担任的是奥克兰的市议员，所以说呢，如果说从政经验的话，他在另外的这个7个候选人当中 中肯定是排名第一的。那么首先呢，他是来自于萨摩亚，而且是家中的老小，所以家里呢也是对他算是寄予厚望吧。他也顺利的，或者是也是凭借着自己的努力吧，成为了这个家中第一个上大学的人。他在大学当中呢学了教育，也学了一些关于哲学方面的。他说他其实也从事过很多工作，也包括经济方面的，还做过会计啊等等。后来呢，他就发现自己对哲学这方面还有政治呢是产生了浓厚的兴趣。然后呢，就问到他说为什么会想着要把自己的这一次啊加入到奥克兰市长整个我们奥克兰老大的这样的一个竞选当中。他就提到说呢，他说他本来就是一个特别。他自己也有这个少数族裔的背景吧，而奥克兰呢又是这样的一个非常文化多元的一个地方，所以说呢，他也是特别愿意聆听很多来自于不同的这个地区或者是来自于不同的背景的选民的声音。他是希望把奥克兰能够打造成一个真正适合所有人都愿意在这边安家，然后呢都能够在这边非常开心的养育自己的子女的一个地方。他本来做区议员的那个时候呢，就觉得他可能聆听的只是这一个小区域的选民的声音不够，所以说呢，他希望能够听到所有奥克兰的民众的声音，并且是真正按照大家的那个需求，打造成一个大家就是选民们或者奥克兰民众们真正愿意居住的一个城市。听起来倒是很美好的一个未来啊，但是这个到底能不能做到，当然还是另外一说。除此之外呢，当然就提到了说这个我们也知道他跟 Phil 嘛，也都是在市议会共事了一段时间。他就说这个 Andrew 就问到他说嘛，说那你会不会成为第二个 Phil 呢？你跟 Phil 到底有什么样的区别呢？他就提到说，他说呢，我跟 Phil 当然也有很多的这个共同点，我们有很多的事情是站在同一战线上的。同一时间呢，我们当然也有很多不会这个同意对方的一些地方。然后 Andrew 就让他举个例子，他就说，比如说这个地区燃油税，当时呢奥克兰决定要征收地区燃油税的时候，他就予以了反对。但是这个大家也知道，在市议会很多的决定是通过投票的，所以投票最终的结果呢就是没有成功，所以地区燃油税是通过了。但是他就举这个例子是说，还是有一些事情是他不同意的。谈到地区燃油税，他就提到说，他说他认为比较合理的方式，当然我们也知道你发展交通肯定是要资金的，如果不收地区燃油税，那你这个钱总要从其他地方来。他就提到说呢，他认为比较合理的一些方式，比如说向中央政府要钱，让他们呢来分一些，就比如说他们的燃油税方面的收益给奥克兰来发展交通。还有呢，就是他认为说，比如说这种拥堵费可能相对于地区燃油税来的要更加合理，因为在很多大城市，如果你要是去到当地的市中心，也是要收拥堵费的。所以他就提到说这样子的话，就是你去到市中心需要缴钱，你不需要市中心，那就可能就不需要缴这个钱了，比地区燃油税显得就更加的公平一点。所以呢，这就是跟这个，当然了，我们刚才在访谈当中其实没有特别谈到比较具体的政策，最初呢还是希望大家对它有一个更加深入的了解吧。然后最后呢，其实 Andrew 也问到他了，就说现在其实上一次的民调也看得出来大家比较接近，而你呢算是在这些候选人当中大家比较熟悉的了，那你会不会对这个民调感觉到失望？他就表示说呢，我还是领先的嘛，虽然领先的不多，但是呢以后还有很长的路要走。而且他说上一次市长选举的时候只有30%多的人出来投票，这个呢当然是最大的问题。所以他就希望在未来的几个月当中，他能够跟更多的选民进行交流，让大家呢能够更加了解他，并且也能够提高市议会选举的投票率。最后呢，就聊到说，他也是在8位候选人当中唯一一个明确的被中央政府的某个政党表示支持的。那当然了，他是属于左翼嘛，所以就得到了工党、绿党还有一些的这个工会的支持。所以呢 ，Andrew 就问到他说，现在工党和绿党的这个民调其实是在下降。那在这样的一个前提之下，他得到工党和绿党的支持，到底对他是有利的，还是其实呢会不会被拽下来？他就提到说，他说其实这个是个对他来说是个非常大的优势。一方面呢，他得到了这些支持，那如果比如说还是工党、绿党执政的话，他跟中央政府就好聊了。以后如果比如说跟中央政府要钱呢，或者要什么资源的，大家比较有共同的话题，所以比较好聊。但同一时间呢，他又是独立的，所以在很多事情上呢，他就不一定要跟中央政府的一些想法是一样的。所以他的意思就是说，两者优势他都占。到底会不会是，那就可能真的要等他胜选了之后可能才知道了。